No
Horrible, mate.
questions.
Okay, well, let's wrap up this segment. We'll
Okay.
do our last segment. Thank you for sharing all that, mate. So
Of course.
now we're going into our next part, which I was mentioning earlier. And this is kind of something that I've been noticing a lot, especially in companies that have either marketing managers internally or companies that, from direct previous experience working in an agencies where there's a specialist team and then there's like an account manager who's like a project manager essentially who's dictating the strategy. Now, this is a big issue where it's just like you don't get this, like you need to stress test everything. Basically, if there's a strategy idea, people just assume, oh, because the strategy sounds good, or there's like, it seems like, oh, that sounds good, that it's going to be number one, executable, and number two, deliver results. So now I'm just noticing more and more and more and more that things I see online, content and strategies, they sound amazing from a strategic point of view. But when you actually go, well, how do we execute this? That starts to drop down significantly. And then when you do execute it, the actual results that come from it are probably minuscule. So
Mm.
we're challenged because most people in the marketing space are strategists, not implementers. They're like
Oh yeah.
most people who implement don't put themselves out there because they're usually more like introverted, analytical, like they just do the work. Versus
Mhm.
strategists are probably more likely to go out there because they're client facing, they're doing other work. So there's a natural bias towards the type of people, and then that starts
Yeah.
to create the difference. I'm seeing, I don't know why it keeps happening more and more, but I'm like seeing more and more strategies that I'm like, yes, this sounds good, but then intuitively I'm like, it doesn't work because I'm doing something like different that's actually delivering results. And like, I know this, I can say all this stuff hand on heart because I am a strategist. I work directly with clients, but I'm also an implementer. And I also do all the data reporting as well. So I can go, yes, this works. No, this doesn't. And I get to apply it
Mm.
across dozens and dozens and dozens of clients. So rather than just going, yeah, well, it didn't work for that one client, so it doesn't work. I get to like test it across multiple industries, multiple clients, the strategic point of view and the implementation. And man, like I'm just saying this to people, like stop believing what you see online. Like you just got to stop it. Like stop thinking that this next strategy, this next hack, this next script is going to change anything. It's actually not. Like all you're doing is feeding attention to someone who's wanting to get your attention to ultimately sell you or get you as a client. But these strategies don't work. Like if they did, show the data over a big sample size of clients, show the data across like a time frame as well, and to show the data in terms of the revenue that it's actually generating, not just like, oh, we got the impression share up or cost per click down. It's like, well, what was the cost per lead impact? What was the cost per sale impact? What was the revenue impact? Like we've got to actually start thinking about all of this stuff in the bigger scheme of business rather than just like some vanity metrics in accounts.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah. I think it goes back to critical thinking skills and this sort of shiny object syndrome, and we've definitely talked about it before, where it's very easy to get addicted to the cycle of new content and some new hack or strategy or whatever that sounds really interesting. And nothing against necessarily putting out free content like that. Obviously, you probably have. I mean, there's a means to an end. You're trying to attract clients, people that are going to pay you money for something that you offer, but at the same time, we always harp on: is it going to be practical? Is it actually going to be? Is it something you've actually tested, or is it just an
Yeah.
idea that you have? And I think, again, that's the critical thinking around it, and not just as a content viewer, but also as a content provider. If that's something you're doing, I think it's from an ethical standpoint, it's better, and people also trust your content more when you say, this is a strategy I'm trying. Here's what we're seeing. Here's early results. You're giving disclaimers like, hey, it's a small sample size. This is the date range. You're being really clear. If you look at any kind of research study, you're going to see all those little nuances because discerning eyes can recognize something that's been well documented, well researched, and they're going to trust that a lot more than someone that just says, I saw something, what was it, yesterday? It was like 90% of people don't use remarketing or something. I'm like, where are you getting that from? Like, are you
Yeah,
like, again, that's just like clickbait, right? Like, there's no reference, there's no source there
yeah,
as to like, where are you getting 90? Would you have access to everybody's account? How do you know the
yeah,
90%? It's just BS. It's just clickbait BS. And it's trying to get attention. But I don't think that that's, again, I talk about the ethics a lot from a content strategy perspective. It doesn't really help anybody. I mean, maybe
yeah,
you're justifying that, well, not enough people do remarketing. So, this is my way of really pushing that. But who hasn't said that? I mean, everyone said that 100 times. There's nothing
yeah,
new there. You're not sharing anything innovative. And I think that I'd love to see more content that's innovative, that challenges assumptions, that has well defined boundaries of a test, and what are the results of the test. Not everything has to be like that. Not everyone's going to be that interested. And obviously, the most popular content is usually going to be some kind of cheat sheet, shortcut, hack,
yeah,
whatever. So if
yeah.
you're trying to get the most clicks and views or engagement, you're going to probably avoid that type of content. But I think there is a whole topic around ethics in content creation, and this
Yeah.
kind of speaks to that. Yeah,
And look, beyond just people wanting to build their businesses, I don't get like I don't mind that, but you got to realize like you're actually just wasting people's time. You're wasting their focus. You're wasting their
yeah,
energy. Like that's the spot where I have like zero tolerance towards people wasting my time or my focus. Like you've only got certain amounts of like mental RAM every day, and you're being pulled across all the tables, being like, you should do this, you should do that. Oh, you haven't done this. You know, this is the newest big hack, but it's like I this is my approach to anything. Is it simple? Number one. If it's complicated, you know it won't be implemented. Number two, is it practical? Can actually something be done, or is it just another theory? And then number three is, does it actually deliver results? And you can kind of stress test that pretty fast with a lot of things. You just go, well, this doesn't seem simple. It seems quite complicated. And that's sometimes not an issue. When it comes to the practicality, like we're talking about strategy, when people have strategy ideas, it's like, well, how do we implement this? You know, and like don't get me wrong, you shouldn't always go, oh, how do we implement it, so then you stop having new ideas. Like start with new ideas and then go, okay, this is a really good idea, how can we implement it? But the challenge is a lot of people have ideas that don't have the actual technical expertise to implement it, so then they're just passing on this like burden to someone else where it's like, this could never been done. Like the idea is good, but you shouldn't have told the client that we're going to do this, because like how am I supposed to do this? Like there's a lot of, it's like saying, I remember hearing years ago from a friend that a CEO said to a client, oh yeah, like they missent out an email to their database. And they go, yeah, yeah, it's fine. Like before people open the email, we can actually change the code in there and it'll change like all the stuff. It's like, no, you can't do that. But I think he'd heard from someone that it could be done. It's like, no, these things can't be done. Like we've got to come back to really like the work that we're doing, whilst it can be hard, it's quite simple and it is extremely practical. Like this, because the data, or after our last conversation, maybe the data is not there, but because we have more data transparency than any other channels and platforms throughout history for advertising or marketing or even in business in general, we have the ability to just simplify it so we can just go, okay, this is what the data is showing. This is what we can do practically with it. We don't need to be reinventing the wheel with so many things. We can evolve naturally by doing the things we're doing and notice, okay, there are gaps here for this client. Let's explore that. But trying to do these big things, sweeping just from a random idea from your sample size of five bad clients that you've had, it's no way to start. Like, it ruins the way the industry can operate. And, it makes people cynical. So then when they come to us, they're like, yeah, I've been
yeah,
burned by agencies, or these people said all this
yeah,
stuff. And I'm like, fuck, man. Like, I
yeah.
get it. I get it. But it also means those clients never leave us because we just do what we do and then they stay. So anyway, thought I'd share that. A bit of a rant.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, there's our rant room. We haven't had one in a while, so that
Yeah.
was that's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just what are your thoughts? Like, because you said before you don't really go on LinkedIn, but you saw me like something the other day, but I know you're just kind of getting a bit fed up of it because you're actually doing the work. When you just do the work and you go deep and you're working directly with clients, you don't need hacks. You don't need a new strategy. You just like be
Yeah.
present with them and go, where's the gap here and what can I do to help bridge that gap?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm focused on implementation. I've got enough work on my plate as it is. I think there's the benefits that I see mostly to social media for any kind of technical expertise is sharing things that have actually worked well, that have been tested. I think that's always great. And you can prove that, like we said. New things that not everybody has, like maybe it's beta tests or new features or new things in the account. Something that's like interesting and useful. If they just like renamed something, that's really that's not that useful. It's like, okay, great. I probably would have figured that out on my own. I think that's always good. Something that's really innovative. Not to toot my own horn too much, but when PMAX first came out, I was like, man, how do we figure out? I think it was maybe placement, like metrics by placement, and I figured out the only way I could do it at the time, outside of the API, was to go and build a Google Ads report, like in the report editor section. And I was like, oh, if we layer these segments together with only these metrics, we can actually see PMAX performance. Again, very early on. It's just those kind of things I think are really valuable to share, because now we're getting insights that we didn't before, but we had to unfortunately hack it together because those there wasn't an easier way to do it. I think that stuff. But personally, I mean, I think it's very easy to kind of get trapped into the social comparison stuff when you get into social media. And if that isn't helping you is that not motivating to you, then why are you going to fill your brain with stuff that's just going to bring you down? Or you're going to think, oh man, I'm so behind. There's all these people doing these things. But mostly for me personally, Michael, like just me, I just, there's only so much value there, and I just get so exhausted with clickbait stuff that I just get tired of rolling my eyes, and I'm just like, oh god, it's
the same stuff. It's the same stuff, unfortunately. And look, I think we're just getting old and cynical, mate. You know, you're just going to get to a point where like you got to be open-minded enough. Like I'm always open-minded with it, but then I'm also like, what we're doing's working. And the natural evolution comes from doing the work. It's not going to be some third party, some person I've never met with the clients that I never see of theirs. Like reality is most people who are doing advertising are either working in-house at an agency or they're making less than $10,000 a month, which means they're probably either not really good at running heaps of clients because $10,000 really isn't that much, or that they've got low-paying clients and they're probably in industries that are that. So it's probably not as relatable, because just because it's all Google ads and advertising does not mean it's like linear across the board, that one strategy will plug into another industry and just fit in like a Lego block. It doesn't work like that. Even e-commerce, like that you specialize in e-commerce, but yes, you've got some probably universal themes, but every business is different. Like just because they're e-commerce and using Google ads does not mean that anything's the same. It's a different business. It's a different product. So like there's universal themes, but never assume that, this person does this strategy and they claim it works all the time for them. So if it doesn't work for me, there's something wrong with me. No, it doesn't work like that. That's why you need direct experience and know the client's data, work on the client, speak to them, find where those loops are and bridge those gaps. Not just like, oh, this checklist said I should have been doing this data API thing for, if we get 1 million orders, but we only get 20 a month.
Yeah. So I thought of something like, for me, I didn't consciously realize that I'm doing this, but maybe this would help other people. When you're looking at content for whatever service you're providing, SEO, social ads, whatever, if you see content and it gives you a physical feeling of like, ooh, that's interesting. Like I'm curious how that would work in this situation for this client, whatever, that already is a good sign. But like the difference between, ooh, that's interesting, I wonder how that would work, and a feeling of anxiety, I think that's a big thing to look for, because if the post is triggering anxiety for you, there's probably a lot going on. Again, we're not psychiatrists, disclaimer. Consult a medical professional.
Medicate yourself with alcohol and drugs.
but really, like I didn't think about it, but really that's a compass that I use, is that physical reaction. If it's something that's interesting because it seems a person is clever and they're showing their results, they're showing how it was tested, they're giving disclaimers, things like that, it's a good feeling. I go, that's interesting. I wonder how that would work for client A, B, and C. If it's a trigger of like anxiety, either because I'm annoyed by it because it's just like clickbait BS that there's no substance there, or if it's like I'm just, oh man, I feel like this is way over my head. Like if I'm deep down the rabbit hole of data science, for example, That's probably also not great either, because that means the content provider might be the content either might be just over your head and is what it is, or it could be that they're not actually creating any value there. They're just, it's almost like, as the kids say, flexing, right? They're just sort of like
Yeah.
flexing that, oh, this could be done this way, but is it really necessary? Michael is a big fan of simplicity. Well, a lot of us should be as well. And I think that is still something that should be in there. Like, even if it's a complicated subject, if you can't digest it, if the audience can't digest it in a way that they can utilize, I would question whether that content is really truly valuable. So
Yeah.
that's just also something to add
It's
in
good
there.
to flex,
Yeah.
mate. It's good to flex.